That's how proud I am of them. You know, they have been an absolute joy to coach. It's an incredible group of women, an incredibly connected group. They're a great example.
After a season defined by disaster and a final game steeped in controversy, what a coach says can either bury a team or build a legend. When the Indiana Fever lost a brutal Game 5 to the Las Vegas Aces, everyone expected to hear about heartbreak, frustration, and a season that ended in ashes. But what Stephanie White said in the press conference wasn't about the loss. It was a chilling promise, a declaration delivered with ice in her veins that put the entire WNBA on notice. Tonight, we uncover the story of a team that was systematically dismantled, a game that felt rigged from the start, and the shocking statement that turned their most painful defeat into the beginning of their reign of terror.
What it means to just put one foot in front of the other, to persevere, to welcome people into the fold, to not give in to circumstance, to lead with grace and dignity, to sacrifice for a greater good and a common good. I'm so thankful to coach these women, and I'm just thankful for this experience with them.
The 2025 Indiana Fever season was supposed to be a coronation, a victory lap for a young, exciting roster. Instead, it became a slow-motion catastrophe, a fight for sheer survival. The optimism that filled the arena on opening night shattered into a million pieces in mid-July when Caitlin Clark, the generational talent and the very face of the franchise, went down clutching her right groin. The diagnosis was a significant injury, and the timeline was indefinite. It was a devastating, season-altering blow, but it was only the beginning of a curse that seemed determined to wipe the Fever off the map. Soon after, the dominoes fell with terrifying speed. Sydney Colson's ACL tore, ending her season. Arie McDonald suffered a nagging foot injury that never fully healed. Sophie Cunningham damaged her MCL, and Chloe Bibby went down with a knee issue. The hits kept coming, with key role player Damaris Dance also missing significant time with a concussion. A roster built for a deep championship run was suddenly decimated, leaving behind a skeleton crew to face the league's most ruthless predator.
We talked about resiliency with this team all season long, but tonight it felt like that wasn't a strong enough word. Have you been a part of a game like that? And just, it felt like everyone laid it all out there.
I feel like there's so many games that we've had this year where that's happened. You know, where you just, you lay it on the line. And, you know, I appreciate what O said, because as coaches, we talk about this all the time. Like, this group continued to allow us as coaches to push them further, harder, to move the bar, to raise the bar.
The crisis ran deeper than just the names on the ever-growing injury report. The Fever didn't just lose their stars, they lost their entire identity, their structure, their very soul. The injuries piled up so relentlessly that the front office was forced into a desperate scramble, signing a rotating cast of players on emergency hardship contracts, just to have enough bodies to field a team for game day. Imagine the sheer chaos. A player signs a contract on a Tuesday, flies into town on Wednesday, and is expected to execute a complex defensive scheme against a league MVP on Thursday. This wasn't basketball, it was triage. For most teams, that level of instability is a death sentence, a one-way ticket to the bottom of the standings in a long, painful offseason. But for this specific Indiana team, under this specific coach, it became something else entirely, the crucible that would forge them into weapons.
There isn't with this group. There wasn't with this group. And because of that, you know, then because of their connectedness, they're able to accomplish things that some of y'all didn't think that they're capable of accomplishing. But nobody in our locker room had any doubt. And in our huddles, and we kept talking about it.
But before the defiance, there was despair. In the quiet moments inside the locker room, away from the cameras and the forced optimism, the team was on the verge of complete collapse. The constant barrage of bad news was taking its toll. Players were exhausted, physically and emotionally. Whispers began to circulate that the season was a lost cause, that it was time to pack it in and look toward next year. The pressure was immense, and the foundation was cracking. This was the true breaking point, the moment where a team either splinters into a dozen pieces or unifies into an unbreakable fist. For a few dark weeks, it looked like the Fever were headed for the former. The morale was at an all-time low, and the fight seemed to be draining from their eyes with every new injury report.
The rosters change from year to year. We'll never have the same group. What's that feeling when you walk out of here knowing this is something that we've been talking about for years?
I think the first word that comes to mind is just gratitude. I mean, I've experienced some special teams in this league, in this organization, but collectively, this group has been at the top. So I'm extremely grateful for every single.
While the outside world was already writing Indiana's obituary, Stephanie White was quietly building a fortress inside that fractured locker room. She saw the despair, she heard the whispers, and she refused to let them win. Her voice never cracked, her resolve never wavered. Even as her roster was being picked apart piece by piece, she pulled her remaining players together and refused to let them see themselves as victims. Her message was simple, relentless, and powerful. Persevere, lead with dignity, and never ever give in to the circumstances. It wasn't about trying to survive without Clark or Cunningham. It was about establishing a new, brutal standard of resilience. No matter who was wearing the jersey, the expectation was to fight until the final buzzer. This mentality slowly took root, transforming a broken team into the league's worst nightmare.
This is going to be an off-season full of change in the league. But what these women accomplished together, I mean, it's a special story. It's a special story, and I hope one day it's told. But I'm so proud and so grateful.
Can't hit the mid-range. Mitchell pursues the board. Another chance for Indiana. That's been a theme in the early going. Mitchell a three is good. More second chance points.
The first sign that something different, something dangerous, was brewing in Indiana came during the Commissioner's Cup, facing the heavily favored Minnesota Lynx. With a patchwork roster that barely had enough healthy players for a full rotation, the Fever pulled off a stunning, logic-defying upset. It wasn't just the fact that they won that was so shocking, it was how they did it with a level of trust, grit, and cohesion that seemed utterly impossible for a team held together by emergency contracts and sheer willpower. They played with a desperate fire that the Lynx simply couldn't match. This should have been a massive warning shot to the rest of the WNBA. Instead, it was ignored.
They're going to roll back away the stretcher, but Kelsey Mitchell is going to be helped back towards the locker rooms as Melissa Smith, her former teammate, and then a bevy of the Aces come around to show their respect for Kelsey Mitchell and the remarkable season that she has had, which may have just ended right there.
The league's reaction was patronizing at best. Analysts on major networks dismissed the win as a fluke, a one-off emotional performance that meant nothing in the long run. Rival fans laughed openly at the idea of this injury-riddled team making any real noise in the playoff. They were treated as a feel-good story, a cute underdog that would soon be put back in its place. The narrative was set. Indiana was tragic, but ultimately irrelevant. All that doubt, all that dismissal, all that disrespect only served as gasoline on the fire. Stephanie White had started. Inside the Fever locker room, every laugh and every condescending comment was noted. By the time they limped into the postseason, they weren't just a team with nothing to lose. They were a team that believed, with every fiber of their being, that they could not be broken.
Ball goes up. Aaliyah Boston.
I don't think that's a foul.
To Indiana, and a late loose ball foul is called against.
Are you joking me?
For fire. She's our battery. She's moving great, and she will drive us, and that's been true so far.
Thank you, Hal. Sims, pull-up jumper. She got it.
Game 5 in Las Vegas wasn't just another playoff game. It was a showdown between a celebrated dynasty and a team that refused to die. The two-time defending champion Aces were at home, in their glittering arena, expecting to put down the wounded underdogs and march on to the next round with ease. But the Indiana team that walked onto that court didn't look scared. They arrived with a cold, unsettling fearlessness. They were playing with house money, and that made them incredibly dangerous. The game was meant to be the final predictable chapter of a tragic story, but the Fever were determined to rip up the script and write their own ending, and what happened next would descend into one of the most chaotic, controversial, and unforgettable elimination games the league has ever witnessed.
Physicality to finish over smaller defenders.
Howard turns the corner, whips a pass. Hull gives it up. Sims connects on a three. Odyssey Sims now with 12 points.
The atmosphere inside the arena was a powder keg waiting for a spark. From the opening tip, the game felt different, more physical, more intense, more desperate. Every possession was a war. Bodies hit the floor on both ends, and you could feel the tension ratcheting up with every whistle. The Aces, used to imposing their will on opponents, seemed surprised by the sheer ferocity of Indiana's defense. This wasn't the broken, dispirited team they had read about. This was a cornered animal, fighting with everything it had left. The game was teetering on a knife's edge, a chaotic ballet of aggression and desperation, long before the first major disaster struck.
And one Las Vegas run. They have their largest lead of the quarter. Boston finds Turner. Turner didn't want to shoot it. Petty will, and knock it down. The stats have not been gaudy, but the decision-making has been excellent tonight from Gray.
Yes.
Petty, they need it. They've got it.
And then it happened. Amidst the chaos of the first half, Indiana's world stopped. Kelsey Mitchell, their explosive offensive leader and the emotional heartbeat of the team, suddenly collapsed on the floor, away from the play. As trainers rushed to her side, a terrifying hush fell over the entire arena. She was eventually helped off the court and later rushed to the hospital with what was reported as severe, debilitating cramps. Losing your top remaining scorer in a do-or-die elimination game should have been the final fatal blow. For any other team, it would have been. For Indiana, it was just the first sign that this game wouldn't be decided by skill or strategy alone. The chaos was only just beginning.
Defense!
Lob it in, Howard. Out to Hull. 6 to shoot. Hull banks it in.
As Indiana reeled from the emotional shock of Mitchell's sudden absence, another, more sinister force seemed to emerge from the shadows. The officiating, Aaliyah Boston, their all-star center and their last true star on the floor, found herself in a relentless battle with more than just the Aces' front court. A series of baffling phantom calls sent her to the bench in early foul trouble, neutralizing her impact. Every time she established position, a whistle blew. Every time she fought for a rebound, she was penalized. Meanwhile, on the other end of the floor, Fever players were getting bumped, shoved, and checked with no calls at all. The disparity was so glaring that you could see the frustration boiling over on the faces of the Indiana players and hear the confusion from the announcers. It started to feel less like a basketball game and more like a targeted, systematic takedown of their last remaining weapon.
What did this team do that has changed the landscape, arguably, in basketball in Indiana?
Number one, they kept getting back up. Collectively. And I think that oftentimes in sport we see one that might, two that might. They kept getting back up collectively.
With their backs pressed firmly against the wall, with their stars either injured, hospitalized, or shackled by foul trouble, the forgotten players on Indiana's roster rose from the ashes. Odyssey Sims, a veteran guard, delivered one of the grittiest, most heroic playoff performances in recent memory, pouring in 27 points and single-handedly willing the Fever to stay alive. Every time the offense stalled and hope seemed lost, Sims would create something out of nothing, a tough, contested mid-range jumper, a fearless drive through traffic to the rim. Shea Petty came off the bench and provided a crucial, infectious spark, hitting timely shots and playing with a relentless energy that ignited her exhausted teammates. Lexi Hull made all the plays that don't show up in the box score, a critical rebound, a timely steal, a perfect defensive rotation. This wasn't a game plan anymore. It was pure, unfiltered defiant.
There's no circumstance that we went through on or off the floor, because we had some off the floor stuff too, that they blinked, that they held their heads down, that they didn't just stand tall and face head on.
The most dramatic and controversial moment came with just 27 seconds left in regulation. As the Fever clung to a slim hope, Aaliyah Boston was whistled for her 6th and final foul on a play so questionable it left the entire arena, including a stunned broadcast crew, shaking their heads in disbelief. Losing their defensive anchor and emotional leader in that exact moment should have sealed their fate for good. Instead, the remaining players on the floor dug in one last time, channeling a level of resilience that defied all logic and miraculously forced overtime. They had survived everything: the injuries, the collapse, the officiating, and were still standing.
You don't see a lot of that nowadays. I know I sound really old right now, but you just don't. And they continued to pour into one another. They continued to pour into us as coaches. They continued to allow us to push them on days and moments when they could have very easily just given up. They loved on us. They loved on one another. And it makes it really special when it sucks that it's over.
Those final 5 minutes of overtime were not basketball. They were a war of attrition. The Fever's lineup was a ghost of what it had been at the start of the season, with players running on pure adrenaline and fumes. Yet they went toe-to-toe with the two-time champions, trading blows in a desperate, frantic final stand. You could see the exhaustion on their faces, the grim determination to leave every last ounce of energy on that court. For a fleeting moment, it looked like the impossible might actually happen, but in the end, the Aces' star power, led by clutch dagger shots from Chelsea Gray, was just enough to finally put them away. The scoreboard showed an Indiana loss, but the real story that night wasn't about who won. It was about how Indiana simply refused to lose.
Lex, how impressive of a job did Stephanie do as coach with all the moving parts throughout the season?
I mean, incredible. Simply incredible. Be so easy to give up and say, we're just gonna take this year, you know, we're gonna be a building year, we're gonna get better, set ourselves up for a good season next year. She came at us and said, and challenged us to continue to fight. So not every coach could do that, and not every coach could motivate a group to do that. And so just really special coach, really special person, and grateful to be able to learn from her.
In the press conference that followed, the room was silent. Everyone expected Stephanie White to be heartbroken, angry, or to rightfully complain about the brutal officiating that had so clearly impacted the game. Instead, she walked to the podium with an unnerving, almost frightening calm and delivered her shocking statement. She looked directly into the cameras and called her team an absolute joy to coach. She praised their dignity, their unity, their unwavering perseverance in the face of a season that would have completely shattered any other group. She didn't dwell on the loss or the calls. In a move of sheer brilliance, she shifted the entire narrative. She declared to the world that this team had found an unbreakable identity in the heart of the storm. It wasn't a eulogy for a lost season. It was the founding speech for a future dynasty.
I feel like this season has been all about figuring it out. No matter what happens, what comes around the corner, figuring out the entire staff. I mean, seriously, they just did a tremendous job with adjustments the entire season. No matter what, someone went down, we need a different action. Like, they were quick on their feet, and that's how they've been the entire season. And so tonight, when Kelsey goes down, no surprise. But I think it also goes to show our entire motto has been next woman up. And be ready, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And I feel like that's exactly what happened tonight, and everyone was just ready when their name was called.
Steph, I know what a competitor you are. How soon do you start thinking about, okay, let's start thinking about next year?
Tomorrow.
I knew it.
You could have
held hands with that. I knew it. I
See, this is what happens when you're on the same wavelength. Good things happen.
knew it.
What's that mindset like you both have, and why are you already like, okay, that's happened, we're on to the next?
It's because you can't hold on to it. I mean, you just look at it, and obviously we're going to be watching the championship games, and that's going to be the feeling that we want to be in that next year. And that's going to be the mindset. It's already prepping. I told you, we're ready to go.
And we're competitors.
Exactly.
I mean, at the end of the day, like, this makes you hungry for more.
The legacy of that game was cemented instantly. The Indiana Fever may have been eliminated, but they left Las Vegas having won something far more valuable and far more terrifying: a fearsome reputation. Rival players and coaches around the league spoke about it in hushed tone. They weren't talking about the Aces' victory, they were talking about the Fever's fight. The story of the broken team that nearly toppled a dynasty became a legend, a cautionary tale for the rest of the WNBA. The questions lingered for months. What if Mitchell hadn't gone down? What if Boston hadn't been fouled out on that call? The loss didn't bury their season, it immortalized it.
Well, yeah, how will you remember this group and this special run that you had all season?
Yeah, I mean, this has been my best year. Seriously, I think with the people that we had in the locker room, the amount of fun that I had on the court, off the court, in the locker room, we just talked about how special this group was and how we're always going to be connected. And honestly, that's how I feel like these women became my sisters so quickly, and it was honestly just some of the best basketball I've had.
And your growth year over year, and what are you looking forward to?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like I'm super proud of myself. Just like you said, adjusting and adapting. And for me, like, a championship's always on my mind. I think no matter what happens, like, obviously you hate losing, but you kind of started with your question with just the progression that it's been. And so for me, obviously, that's my mindset. We got a taste of it, Game 5 semifinals, and now we want the real thing. And that's honestly going to be our mindset coming in for next year. And I'm super excited going into this offseason. Time to put a lot of work in. Just get ready to come back and win.
That night, the Indiana Fever ceased to be an underdog story. They became a monster in waiting. Sophie Cunningham said it best in the locker room afterward, her voice raw with emotion, but filled with a cold, hard fire. You better believe we are coming for everybody next season. That wasn't just a soundbite, it was a promise, a warning to the entire league. With a healthy Caitlin Clark returning to orchestrate the offense, a vengeful Aaliyah Boston ready to dominate the paint, and a resilient Kelsey Mitchell providing lethal scoring firepower. The core is set, but their true weapon is no longer just their talent. It's the unbreakable, battle-hardened identity forged in the fires of the 2025 season. The heartbreak wasn't an ending. It was the brutal, bloody, and beautiful origin story for their 2026 revenge tour.